Hello everybody, welcome to this video. It's the continuation of our series on A-Level English Literature. Everything you see in this video series comes from Mr. Bruff's Guide to A-Level English Literature, which is available at mrbruff.com and Amazon. It was written by Carrie Lewis, aka Mrs. Spag, and it really is the definitive guide. No matter which exam board you're on, it's going to help you. So we're going to look today at genre. Now, genre can be defined as a category of writing, but it's worth noting that the boundaries between genre and form are sometimes blurred. A short story, for example, is an example of a literary form, but some people classify it as a genre because it became extremely popular during the Victorian literary movement. Furthermore, many Victorian short stories contain elements of ghost stories, thereby blending genres. Now, the overlapping of genres is common. You might be reading a text that is a subgroup of a genre or a mixture of genres. Shakespeare's plays are comedies, which are light-hearted plays with happy endings and marriages, tragedies, stressful situations that end in death, and histories, plays based on actual historical characters and events. But later in his life, Shakespeare experimented with a new genre, the tragicomedy, which blended elements of tragedy and comedy. If genre classification systems sound confusing, don't let it worry you. Your analysis is more important. You just need to consider the writer's technique and tone of writing, choice of subject matter and character. Also consider what might have influenced writers to employ a particular genre. You should ask yourself the extent to which they conform to the genre, what effects are they trying to achieve, to what extent are they successful, and what is the impact on you, the reader. So popular genres today include action, adventure, crime, horror, romance, thrillers, and some of these, for example romance, are timeless. They've been popular for as long as literature has been around. The aim of this video then is to introduce you to key literary genres, and you can use them as a starting point for your research. It's not an exhaustive list, there are many others. So we're going to go through them in alphabetical order, starting with allegory. You might remember that an allegory is a type of extended metaphor which has an obvious surface meaning and also a symbolic meaning beneath the text. A famous example would be George Orwell's Animal Farm, which is an allegorical text of the 1917 Russian Revolution and the early years of communism. The thing about an allegory is that it is very obvious that everything is a metaphor for something else, and that metaphor is extended throughout the text. The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe is another example. So it's not just where there's a brief moment of metaphor, but where the whole thing seems to be a metaphor for something else. Next we have comedy. So comedy was one of just two dramatic genres, the second being tragedy, more than 2,000 years ago in Greece. The word comedy means revelry or merrymaking and originates from a festival that was dedicated to Dionysus, the Greek god of wine and revelry. Now, comedies appear in different literary forms, but they do share some characteristics. So these include the theme of love or strong physical attraction, which is a motivating force, and a servant who is cleverer than his master. Comedies often have plain everyday speech with lots of puns and wordplay, including double entendre, which is a word with two meanings, the second of which is deliberately rude. And in the 16th and 17th century, Puritanism and the Civil War in England put a stop to comedies performed on stage. From 1649, when King Charles II ascended the throne, comedy became really popular again, and a new genre called Restoration comedy emerged at this time. Following two world wars, the genre of comedy changed in the 20th century. The focus now became the decay and disintegration of society. Black comedy, containing dark and depressing themes, emerged as a subgenre, as did absurdist comedy with its surreal humour. So popular examples of best-selling prose in this genre include The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Catch-22, and any of Terry Pratchett's Discworld series, which of course can also be categorized as fantasy. Next we have the dystopian genre. So a dystopia is an imaginary place where life is extremely bad, opposite to utopia. And dystopian literature is sometimes classified as futuristic because settings are often in the future. The author uses this genre to make a social comment on the consequences of a particular scientific, social, or political ideology. For example, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World in 1931, George Orwell's 1984 in 1949, both reflect contemporary fears of living under a socialist regime where independent thinking is completely forbidden. Now, Huxley also imagines the impact that advances of science and technology have on individual lives, and Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, 1985, takes human rights abuse and imagines a future society in which these all come together. Lots of films, dystopian, you'll know that things like The Hunger Games are all examples of dystopia. Next, fantasy. Now, stories in the fantasy genre are often set in an imaginary world, often medieval, and contain magic and magical creatures. So George MacDonald is believed to have written the first modern fantasy novel, but J.R.R. Tolkien firmly established this genre with The Hobbit and, of course, its sequel, The Lord of the Rings. Inspired by old Germanic stories and mythology, Tolkien reworked ideas from Anglo-Saxon and Norse literature, such as slaying a dragon that is guarding treasure. Today, of course, Game of Thrones is the most popular example of the fantasy genre for adults. If you're one of the many Game of Thrones fans who's waiting for the next book, then you can watch these videos while you're waiting. Gothic. Now, Gothic genre is one that you're probably familiar with. We tend to study it a little bit at primary, a little bit at Key Stage 3, but it is actually a very complex genre and is often oversimplified, I think, earlier in our school years. So the origins of this genre are dominated by the subgenre Gothic horror, and the original sort of Gothic text is Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto, and in its second edition it was subtitled A Gothic Story. The Gothic genre combines romanticism with fiction and horror. In Gothic literature, characters usually include a virtuous orphaned heroine and a murderous villain with terrifying eyes. Tales are set in the past, often in remote foreign castles or monasteries with secret subterranean passages. You can expect to encounter a vampire, a ghost, or a monster. The weather's usually horrible. There's lots of melodrama. Now, this genre was popular in the Romantic movement, but by the 1840s it began to decline. It did, however, revive in a Victorian craze for ghost stories, and this evolved into the subgenre of the Victorian Gothic. The Gothic genre retains its popularity today, inspiring other subgenres such as Southern Gothic, set in America's South, and Gothic science fiction, which has the same atmosphere as Gothic novels but uses science to explain Gothic elements. For example, a vampire might be the result of a contagion, and therefore science explains the existence of vampires. Historical, well, this genre is quite obviously set in the past, has a historical backdrop. The Book Thief, 2005, is set in Nazi Germany. The Other Berlin Girl is set in the reign of Henry VIII, and Arthur Golden's Memoirs of a Geisha is set in Japan before and after World War II. It doesn't have to be written at that time, it's about when it's set, remember. Magical realism, this is something you might study a little bit on your degree. It's not part of the British literary heritage, but it's good to be aware of significant genres from other countries. And if you enjoy the fantasy genre, then magical realism is for you. Originating in Latin America, the roots of magical realism lie in the Roman Catholic religion, whose followers believe in miracles. And in the literature of magical realism, this idea is extended to the idea of magic being possible and a normal part of everyday life. Perhaps one of the most famous South American authors to write in this genre is Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1982. 100 Years of Solitude, which was published in 1967, contains miraculous events which are regarded as commonplace occurrences. Another award-winning author is Isabelle Allende, who wrote various magical realism novels, perhaps the most famous being The House of the Spirits, also in 1982. Mystery. So this genre contains a crime that needs to be solved and sometimes a death, in which case it would cross over to the murder mystery genre. There's often a detective who solves the crime, the suspects all have a motive and an opportunity, and the mystery might also be supernatural, which was the theme of popular pulp magazines in the 30s and 40s. Now, interestingly, the mystery genre emerged around 200 years ago when police forces were established and there was a clear need for detectives. So famous literary works include The Murders in the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe, 1841. The one I've got pictured here is The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins, 1868. I choose that because it's got a character called Mr. Bruff, so I always thought that was quite fun. The hugely popular Sherlock Holmes mysteries, written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And in the 1920s, Edward Straightmayer wrote The Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew under pseudonyms, and Agatha Christie emerged as a celebrated author with her famous detectives Poirot and Miss Marple, and she published more than 80 works in her lifetime, including Murder on the Orient Express in 1934 and the best-selling mystery novel of all time, And Then There Were None, 1939. Okay, romance. Now this genre spans hundreds of years. It was popular in medieval literary movement featuring wizards and dragons and knights rescuing maidens in distress. In the 17th century it began to decline in popularity due to the Enlightenment period's fashion of rationalism. Later in the 18th century it re-emerged as part of the Romantic movement, splitting into the subgenres of Gothic romance and historical romance. Typical characteristics of the romance genre are, of course, two people fall in love with each other, there's an obstacle, they overcome the obstacle, and they live happily ever after. That's pretty much the storyline of every rom-com movie as well. Science fiction, very popular one, set in an imaginary future, but unlike dystopian literature, the future's not necessarily bad. The emphasis is on real or imaginary scientific discoveries and space technology, such as time travel, space travel, parallel universes. French author Jules Verne is considered the father of science fiction. Examples of his work include Journey to the Centre of the Earth, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The British author H.G. Wells wrote The Time Machine, 1895, The Invisible Man and The War of the Worlds. And as I say, this is a very popular genre for readers today. Social or political novels. Well, the social novel is a work of fiction that aims to draw attention to a social problem. This might be poverty, child labour, prejudice or violence. Many of Charles Dickens' novels can be seen to contain a social message. Other examples include Mary Barton by Elizabeth Gaskell, 1848, who focuses on relations between employers and factory workers. So not the perhaps the most exciting genre of literature, but always interesting to analyse when looking at the context. Finally, tragedy. Well, the Greek playwrights established this genre more than 2,000 years ago, as we've seen at a time when there were just two genres of comedy and tragedy. The word tragedy, here's a bonus point for your pub quiz, means goat song and links to goats being sacrificed at public festivals. So traditionally the protagonist of a tragedy is a high-ranking person who faces a loss due to a weakness in his character. In Shakespeare's Hamlet, the prince dies because he wants to avenge himself against his stepfather who murdered his father. Even though his desire for revenge is understandable, the fact that he takes it into his own hands is seen to be his weakness. Shakespeare develops the genre, making protagonists like Romeo and Juliet ordinary people. He also presented circumstances as being responsible for deaths rather than personal weaknesses. In addition, he developed the moralistic theme of sinners gaining their true deserts. For example, Macbeth dies as a consequence of murdering King Duncan. In modern times, the tragic genre might contain a message about the failings of society. Arthur Miller's The Crucible, 1953, appears to be about the 1692-1693 Salem witch trials in America, but in reality it's an allegory of McCarthyism, a campaign led by Senator Joseph McCarthy in 1950 to 54, A campaign in which the American government accused people, many of them innocent, of being communists and then blacklisted them, firing them from their jobs. Like dramatic tragedies, tragic novels deal with tragic themes. For example, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, 1891, by Thomas Hardy, focuses on the negative consequences of sexual double standards. So that's it for genre. It's important to remember that the genres detailed in this video are examples only. There are many subgenres, and when you're reading a text, it might also contain elements of at least two genres. So I think the sort of thing to take from this is when you're reading a text, does it stick to any generic conventions, and are there any that it seems to subvert, miss out, and if so, why is that important? Please do pick up Mr. Bruff's Guide to A-Level English Literature, £4.99 at mrbruff.com and Amazon as an instant download to your iPad, Kindle, computer, etc.